everybody. You're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in. And for this particular episode, you don't even have to be a comic fan to tune in, because we're going to be talking about comic book movies. There's a lot of people that never take that jump, you know. There are people who are rabid Marvel MCU fans that have never read a comic book. And I don't understand, but at the same token, let's celebrate the end of that. We're each going to be presenting our 5 favorite films that are somehow based on comic books. We've done a show like this in the past. We did one in 2014, but it was me and another guy and another guy. So for this one, I don't know what the this is going to play out with the two of you doing this, because I know we have some commonalities and we also have very different tastes in film. So it's going to be interesting. We did pose questions out on the internet. We got some interesting responses. It's also interesting that I have a different top 5 from when we originally talked about this, principally because there's newer films, but also there's always a reappreciation. You know, there's always things that are you rank a little higher one day and then not so much feeling it the next, and it might be indicative of that. But my top 5 stays, pretty stable, at least in terms of comic book films. My top 10 films I think are locked. This was a question I had for you two before we start talking about them. Would any of the films you're talking about make your top 10 films of all time?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine wouldn't, and that's not slamming them as artistic work. Number one would just fall short. All right, so we should get into this. On social media, we did ask some people what some of their favorites are, and I see some people tuning in. So I'm not going to go through everybody, but for people who are past guests on the show or tuning in, I'll just throw out what was said. First past guest, we have Mike Sullivan who's tuned in. He listed The Crow, Road to Perdition, and Venom. Our friend Mike Lovins, who was on some of our Star Wars episodes, he gave us a top 10, starting with Batman 89, The Crow, The Dark Knight, Deadpool, Superman 2, Logan, Joker, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, X2, and Wonder Woman. Our friend Tom Kelly, past guest as well, some of his favorites, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Blade, Wonder Woman, Into the Spider-Verse, Superman 2, Lego Batman, and Men in Black. Sorry about that.
I was like, really? That was
the music behind me. Kevin Sonicson, who was on our show with Cena's video project, Doctor Strange, X2, Logan, a lot of X2 love here, Spider-Man 2, Superman 2, a lot of 2 love here, and Atomic Blonde. Though he's never been a guest, he's been a friend of the show, the artist Robert Hack from Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and a lot of other things. He listed, and this completely fits into his aesthetic. I'm not surprised by any of these choices. Lone Wolf and Cub, Lady Snowblood, which is, I'm very much okay with that pick. And the British versions of Tales of the Crypt and Vault of Horror from the 70s. That's pretty cool choices there. Rob Steger, who's been on our show and was also my co-host for the Thundercast, reminiscing about that one today as well. Thor Ragnarok for embracing the silly, Men in Black for doing the same, Into the Spider-Verse, Black Panther, and for the Majesty, The Rocketeer, Superman the Movie, Dredd, The Dark Knight, American Splendor, A History of Violence, and the 66 Batman film. And Ed Cato brought up a film I've never heard of before, and looking at it sounds interesting. Tamara Drew, which is based on a serialized British strip that was collected as a graphic novel, which is effectively a rom-com. I thought that's a really interesting pick. And so that's some of the picks that we have. Let's throw some other ones out there, but just a really interesting and broad scope of films. And when you do think of films that I think the person who's uninitiated into comic books and graphic novels probably would be shocked, that certain films like, say, Road to Perdition started life as a graphic novel. So certainly one of the films I'm going to be talking about, I think, is a big surprise. That's the medium it first appeared in. So
Yeah.
yeah. And
Cool.
for anybody who's tuning in, I still see there's some people online there. If you want to chime in with what some of your favorites are, please do. Love to hear it. So
Yeah,
do
definitely.
you
We'll
want?
bring it up here on the screen as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to start with the films?
Let's do it.
Sure.
All right.
get going.
Well, let's start as we always do with Steve. Steve, tell us your number 5 pick for favorite comic book film.
So, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, Bill. I think the my list of top 5 has really. It's not set in stone. It shifts back and forth pretty much every year, and sometimes it's not just because I'm, another great movie comes up, but also sometimes I look at those same movies that I've loved, and I just kind of like I reevaluate. I'm like, yeah, how do I feel about this now? Maybe less so. Maybe this one's coming up because I've watched it a few more times and I've found some great moments in it. But one of them that's been consistently on my top 10 lists since it first came out in the movie theaters has been Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And Scott Pilgrim, this is based on a graphic novel, of course, or actually a series of graphic novels that was done in a manga format, which I actually have never read. So I know bad comic book reader. I've never read the Scott Pilgrim series itself. But I knew of it. I, had anticipated it. And when it was finally released in film form, I was like, oh, God, I've got to jump on this. This looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. But I did not watch or read a lot about the film version itself, other than, what it was based on and some of the interesting things about it going into it. So when I watched it, the entire movie was brand new to me. The majority of the plot, what was going to happen, all of this. And of course, the music was not what I expected. Fantastic, of course. But this comic book movie takes sort of its source material, which is really, lots of manga, lots of video games, sort of an interesting sort of 8-bit, 16-bit aesthetic, and wraps it all into something that's very much a millennial film, I guess, or maybe a Gen Z film. Very Canadian at heart. Edgar Wright, the director, really wanted to make sure that this was a very, very Canadian film. So he hired all Canadians, as actors and performers, just to make sure this really got punched out and really sort of spotlighted life in Toronto of a certain type. But it's great. The movie's hilarious. The characters are just wonderfully weird. The setups are just way out there and wacky and crazy, and the action is pretty fast because these are not characters that, just looking at them, you'd think, oh wow, that's somebody who can, do a roundhouse and fly or do anything crazy. But all of them do. All of them are wild and crazy. But with all of that at heart, it is a very cute love story. Somebody who's obsessed with a girl who is probably way outside his league, but he just feels that they have a destiny together, and he really wants to explore that. And unfortunately, he has to do that by, not metaphorically, but actually beating all of her exes into a pulp, defeating them somehow, and learning from that experience. But it's a lot of fun. It's super exciting. I know everybody that I've shown this movie to over the past 10 years since it's been out have also really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily for everybody. If you don't like kind of dorky heroes, you might be less into this movie, but the music still rocks. It's still, still amazing after all these years. Plus you get Brie Larson early on Captain Marvel doing one of the really cool musical numbers in this film. You get a lot of other, superhero cameos. Chris Evans plays one of the X's. And so does
Brandon Routh.
Brandon Routh, formerly a Superman from Superman Returns, but then also Captain Atom, or not Captain Atom, the Atom from DC's Legends of Tomorrow and Arrow on the CW. There's just so much here in this movie. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great cameos, and oh my god, did you see that? Plus, Aubrey Plaza is just wonderfully Aubrey Plaza in this movie too. So I definitely recommend if you haven't seen it. This is my 5th of my top 5 currently. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Okay, cool. It didn't make my top 5, but I do love it. I have it in my hands here, and it's a very, very Edgar Wright film.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Gloriously Edgar Wright. A question I have is, if from this, did you ever read Scott Pilgrim in graphic novel?
I didn't. I actually did not go back. See, that's the thing. Like, I never read Scott Pilgrim prior to this, and I didn't go back to read it. So I am one of those people, I think we were talking about this before, who loves a particular comic book movie or series of movies, but then isn't enticed to go back and read the source material. And unfortunately, I just never got into the source material itself. The movie is enough for me, which I know is weird, especially when we start getting into some of these other movies. But for me, I think the movie was more than enough. But I know, recommended wise, Scott Pilgrim comes very highly recommended for somebody who's interested in a North American style manga series.
Yeah. And I do think sometimes you do get films that stray so much from the source material that it isn't necessarily requisite to continue that experience. One that immediately comes to mind is Wanted. You know, that it's just so far different from the film experience. And I think Wanted is one of the best, like, last 3-4 minutes of a film. That whole sequence as he's going, and the bullet traveling through the donut and all that stuff. I mean, I just think that's phenomenal. I think it's a good film. I wouldn't put it in this category, but I do think it's a very vibrant, cool film, and that ending is perfect. But again, really nothing like the graphic novel it's based on.
I did want to bring up some of the comments here. Lima Neto, according to Scott Pilgrim's soundtrack, still amazing after all these years. It was such a surprise, great movie. And 100%. Every once in a while, I will do the whole soundtrack, just put it on in the background because it's fun. It's kind of goofy. Do we want to actually? We've got some comments. Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say they actually have at the record store I go to. They have a 33 of the Scott Pilgrim, and it's on my short list of things to buy. And so this movie did not make my top 5 list as well, but it was solidly in my honorable mentions, specifically because of the soundtrack. Because I'm the type of person, much like this movie kind of dictates, I attach and adhere music to moments in my life, and I think this movie does a really good job with that. Not to mention, it leans into the fact that it is comics based, like with the graphics and everything. So I adore it. I'm glad it's represented because it deserves to be.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what other comments you got there, Steve?
Yeah, we've got some comments here, also from Lima and from John West. I was talking about what kind of favorite movies they wanted to bring that up. I think we can kind of pepper these in. Lima says here, American Splendor, the movie is wonderful, mixing layers of fiction and reality interwoven here. It's really great and totally a comic book movie, like a continuation and an adaptation all in one. I totally agree with that. And then John Westhoff has to bring in Into the Spider-Verse, Winter Soldier, and we'll be talking about that. Spider-Man 2, Lego DC Justice League.
Oh, those
Teen
are
Titans
gems.
Go to the movies.
The Lego movies that are done for the direct market they're gems. We're not necessarily going to be talking about one of them, but something kind of in that wheelhouse is on my list. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, cool. I'm passing it on to Caleb, I guess.
All right, Caleb, tell us about your number 5 pick.
Well, I want to take us back to the year of our Lord, 1995. And the first one, number 5 on my list, is none other than Tank Girl. I adore this film. I was probably too young to watch it when I watched it, but that's what made it so kind of amazing. This was the first film I saw that was just raw, unpolished. It kind of has a punk rock vibe to it. It throws out these, and for a young kid, these kind of counterculture ideas that were laced in and out of it. I think it's phenomenal. It still holds up. I watched it today. I was not 3, John. I was 8. Sir, you respect my age. but no, so it has, like I said, it has this kind of counterculture punk rock vibe to it that I really gravitated to as a kid. The music in this was fun too. It was very, very 90s, very much of its time. But I really appreciated the fact that it wasn't polished like all of these other blockbuster films that I saw at the time. And, you can't help but fall in love with the cast. Lori Petty is amazing in this film. She is exactly the perfect thing that this film needed. Naomi Watts as Jet Girl is incredibly fun. This might have been my first introduction to Ice-T. Not his music. I mean, this might be my first time knowing that Ice-T existed in the world, which is kind of a crazy, cool thing. I mean, Booga is hilarious. You've got these, this nuclear wasteland filled with weird, crazy, strong, independent women who take no shit, that hang out and possibly have coital relationships with kangaroo men. It's absurdity,
like you do,
in the best kind of way. You got to see Malcolm McDowell in this film. He was fun. Just genuinely cool. Iggy Pop is in this movie, and I didn't know that till years later. And so when you look back and you see kind of how this movie got made, who all had a hand in it, who all played, did short little cameos. It's just chock full of pop culture awesomeness and counterculture glory. And it will, I can sit down and watch it today. And that's kind of what frames my list. I'm not making the argument that these are the best. Like, these are not insane. And I'm not making what my list does for me. I can sit down and watch them at any time. The rewatchability, and they bring me just pure joy to watch. I am still intrigued by them. They still wrap me into the plot, even though I can almost quote the movies word for word. I know exactly what's going to happen. I still am just sucked into everything about the films, and that is absolutely true for Tank Girl. And Steve, like your book, it's kind of a love story. I'm not sure what y'all's. I don't think we've ever had this conversation. What are y'all's thoughts on the film?
The last time I saw it was 26 years ago, and I was kind of on ecstasy, and which was an interesting experience with this film, and I didn't walk away knowing exactly what was in the film or what I thought was in the film. Soundtrack's great. I think a lot of the films we're all talking about have amazing soundtracks, and we can get into that. But it's due for a reappraisal just because I wasn't fooling me when I saw it.
And since Steve stuck the comic art out up here, shout out to Jamie Hewlett and Alan Martin, who created the character in the first comic book and brought it to life, because it really did. It took the comic book and it brought it out, and it showed. I mean, for what the ability that they had at the time, very much a comic book movie. Like, it looked like a comic book and had the feel of it.
Yep. And tying into music and his later involvement in Gorillaz, I think you can see it from there.
Oh, absolutely. That cover alone.
Yep.
What about you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of like you, it's one of those movies that I would watch over and over and over again. In fact, there was a period of time, probably about 5-6 years, where I would watch this and Barbarella on my birthday every year. And could quote everything line by line, even the that Lori Petty would do. Like, that was just me. Like, I would watch it and just be in the movie because it's so crazy. It's wild. The soundtrack is amazing. Everybody's performance is just like, it is chaos on the screen. It feels like it's the kind of movie that feels like there was a director there somewhere that just kind of said, just do whatever. And yeah, so is it a great movie? Like, is it a great film? Probably not, but it is absolutely a ton of fun to watch, to listen to. Soundtrack's great. I mean, you've got Bjork in there. I think it was the first time I ever heard Bjork when I first saw this movie. I think probably 95, 96. And then immediately became a Bjork fan. I mean, this is definitely one of those movies that you can go back to and just find some more goofy fun that makes you happy.
because it's dystopian, it kind of still it stands the test of time. And I know that's kind of sad to think about, but it's still, like the stuff in the film is still very relevant today, even though it's very like it's dated in the 90s. But like you can watch it and you're like, oh shit, that hasn't changed at all. So it still holds up. And I would be remiss to not shout out James Hong in this movie. Like James Hong is one of those people that I see in films. I'm like, oh, it's James Hong. Be happy that he's there. So just a character actor from hell. I adore him.
Awesome.
I'm now remembering my circumstances, and I actually saw this before we went to Limelight. So, like, how 90s can you get? You know,
you were steeped in it, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, we're gonna move from Sex Bomb and Portishead and Belly and Veruca Salt over to Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 22 for my pick. And the film that I want to talk about is based on a graphic novel that came out of France in 2012, which is La Mort de Staline, and that translates to The Death of Stalin from 2017. It was written and directed by Armando Iannucci, who is very well known for political satires like Veep and The Thick of It. Definitely in that same wheelhouse, in some ways even more so, because he doesn't necessarily have some of the restrictions of television standards. And this is actually a situation much like Steve, where I haven't read the original source material, and some of that was because the writer Fabian Nuri was a bit disappointed that the translation had lacked a bit of the sting, and there's going to be a new translation next year, so I'm kind of holding off for that. The Death of Stalin depicts what it literally is: the death of Stalin, Russia's leader's death in 1953, and the immediate internal social and political power struggle that ensued. It compresses some events that took place over like 6 or 7 months and like effectively a weekend. So that's not going to spoil your enjoyment of the film whatsoever. You don't need to know about Soviet Russian history one bit to enjoy this film. An amazing cast, as you can see there. Jason Isaacs with a stunning turn as a military hero. You have Michael Palin. You have Steve Buscemi as Nikita Khrushchev. It's a standout performance, though, and he did receive some of the awards. Is Simon Russell Beale as the head of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police at the time, Laurent V. Beria, who really was a demon in a group of demons. Even he was, a bit extreme. And it's one of those situations where, the Iannucci finds the humor in everything. Even the act of carrying Stalin's, at this point, unconscious body from one room to another onto a bed is 5 minutes of hilarity. I mean, with people complaining that he's pissing on them. It is a really, it's a black comedy with black comedy underlined. It works so well on that basis. And in continuing with something that's a history in the show, I was looking to tell people, with the films that we were picking, if it's on streaming where you can go. And in the case of Scott Pilgrim and in the case of Tank Girl, they're not available on any of the streaming sites currently, but they are available for purchase and from resources like Vudu and Amazon Prime. With this one, it's on Netflix, but it ends like in an hour and 50 minutes. So sorry. And that's happened on the show a couple of times. There was an Aquaman documentary on DC Universe that mysteriously disappeared right after we talked about it. There was DC Comics pressured some of the public domain sites that had some of the public domain Shazam stories, like right after the film. It's like, there's a history of this with this show. And I was kind of not surprised at all. But I can say that everybody that I've turned on to this film has loved it. And especially if you're a fan of the aforementioned political shows that Iannucci's been behind, I certainly think that this definitely would be something you'd want to see. This is the cover of the graphic novel that is out right now, and that's my number 5 pick. Interesting that none of us have superheroes yet.
No, not yet.
I'm kind of loving that.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah.
Although Tank Girl's kind of super, but I don't know how much of a hero he is.
So have either of you seen this film?
I haven't. No.
Okay.
No, and I haven't read
the
the
book.
book.
I read the book. I need to get on that.
Okay, you will be richer for it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, that should be pretty cool. Huh.
Yep.
Well, it's funny that you should talk about something that is, originally from source material that was written in French, because that is my next pick. My number 4 is a film that was it's an animated film based off of a graphic novel, or actually a set of 2 separate graphic novels that were written by an expat from Iran, formerly known as Persia. For the graphic novel version, this is Persepolis. This was part 1, and there was also a part 2 as well that detailed sort of the trip from Iran to France. But the film itself, the art style, because it was animated, is almost perfectly translated from the page to the screen. They took Marjan Satrapi's style and just translated it into animation. And it's a beautiful book. If you love the art in the book, the film is exactly, is very close. Not exactly, but it captures that feel very well in a way that animation can do. Where live action, doesn't always succeed. But this film was originally in French, but it has been dubbed into English with several, big stars as the voice actors. But I think it does an amazing job to, put you into an historical context, and a very personal historical context of the author, in growing up in an era where there's just so much change going on politically and socially in her home country. And, her parents were active socialists, which, wasn't really good when the Shah was in power, but then also wasn't all that great once the Ayatollah and the religious, extremist government came to power as well, helped very strongly by the student movement. So it was a very young political movement, and she was at an age where she was maybe 10 years below the college student. She was like 10 or 11 when the regime change happened, and her growing up, seeing everything change from just very European style upbringing to very, very strict, very religious, and very Middle Eastern upbringing. It very interesting. And of course the film and the book is her looking back now that she lives in France, and she's she has a very different life than the one that she left behind. So it's a great book, a lot of history, a lot of social commentary. And regardless of how you feel of Iran today, I think this really gives you a very interesting, and honestly, there's a lot of love here for her homeland in a way that is hard, I think, sometimes for Western people to understand. It's like, how could you love that country? But a country is not just a government. It's also the people and the culture and the language and the history and all of these things. And I think she really does a great job of bringing that emotion through on the page, but then also they did an amazing job, I think, in translating that to the screen. So Persepolis, and I think that is available on a couple streaming services now.
It's available on the Criterion channel.
Yeah. And I've seen it before on Amazon Prime. It's kind of jumped around depending on how the rights are working, but it's definitely something, if you come across, definitely give it a shot and check out.
Nice. That is a circumstance where I haven't read the book, but I do own it. Someday I'll get to it.
Oh yeah, I have read both of the books.
Yeah,
and
I
the
have.
sequel series and everything else. So.
And this was a good shopping day. It was both Funhouse and Persepolis.
Yeah.
And
Ooh.
I hit Funhouse
1-2
first and
punch.
just somehow never got over to Persepolis.
Persepolis is amazing, and just like we've been talking about, it's one of those that it stands the test of time. You can read it today and stuff is still relevant. And for anybody who wants to know what it's like to live in a place that a lot of people abhor, but you have a certain weird love for it, move to Arkansas. And I can relate. So I'm gonna break the streak. Is that okay?
That's just fine.
Break it.
So, and this is actually a film that's been mentioned by some of our listeners and people who chimed in, and I share the love for it. Now, I will caveat that I think, even though I'm putting it on here, this book is a cheat because it is a movie. It's a film based on comic characters, but it's not a film based on a specific comic book, and that is Into the Spider-Verse, an animated film. It's not only is this one of the best superhero animated films, it's one of the best superhero films, just period, above and beyond. I have the utmost love for this. It came out in 2018 out of an all-star cast. I still love Mahershala Ali as Uncle Aaron, of course, the Shocker in this world. And it gives us Miles Morales, and really it gives us Miles Morales the first time that we've seen him. I don't know if, the first time I saw him outside of the pages of a comic book, at least, he may have been in some other stuff here or there, but wonderful. You get Shamik Moore, who voiced him. You get Jake Johnson as Peter Parker in this story, and you get Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, among some other characters. Most of you have seen the film, so there's really no need to rehash the plot, but it does play with the multiverse, which is something that we're about to see hit the live action film franchise. So really great that it started there. But as you can see from the graphic, you get Peter Parker, who is akin to the Peter Parker that we know, not exactly the same from like the 616 world, but something like that. Miles Morales, you get Spider-Gwen, you get the Spider-Man Noir, you get Spider-Pig, and
Spider-Ham, yeah.
Spider-Ham. You get this incredibly
Peter Parker
diverse cast of characters. You get the, and then forgive me, I can't remember the name, but the manga based Spider character that they did for like the anime for overseas. And I wish my buddy Jerry that I used to do a podcast with could probably tell me everything I wanted to know and more about that character because he's such a big fan. But this yet again, the same thing that I loved about Tank Girl is something I love about this. It brought a comic book to life in a different way, because obviously this isn't live action film, but this is the closest thing that I've seen to having a comic book just get up and move. We've had stop action comic movies before. This is something totally different, and it brings the vibrancy and the kinetic energy that you get in these kind of Miles Morales style comic books. It's very much Jim Mahfood kind of stylistically. It's Jason Latour. It brings out just incredible things, and I just adore it. Again, the rewatchability of the film is out the window, and the sequel is about to come out. I think next year sometime. So I can't wait to see what they do with it. Hopefully we're going to get Miguel O'Hara. I know it was hinted at in the last one. So I fingers crossed. But it was just wonderful, and it kept the heart of a Spider-Man story, which is what was also incredibly important to me, because you can give me these animated features featuring these characters, but for a character like Spider-Man, no matter which version of Spider-Man it is, no matter which universe he's in, no matter which iteration and who is embodying the legacy of that character, it gets down to the heart and the struggle of that character that pushing the machine off of themselves, so to speak, just to go full-blown Ditko with it. So yeah, I could go turn this on Disney Plus right now, or I could reach into my DVD case and pull it out right now. I've got it in several forms, and I can't wait to sit down and watch this with my nephew for the first time. But I also can't wait to sit down and watch this with my husband again. It has got such an appeal that crosses generations. So it's solidly one of the best films that came out that year and to date.
Okay. Unfortunately, it is no longer streaming on Disney Plus.
Oh, really? Okay.
It is streaming on FX now, and it is streaming on, get this, Spectrum. So, so it is out there. It was on Disney Plus. They do moratoriums and things return, every so often. So that's what that situation is. I just wanted to mention that if people wanted to see these films. So, sometimes it's easier than it should be. I really like this film. Talk about just chock full of Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Through the film, and just fun from the word go. And the second Marvel film in a row, because I do consider Big Hero 6 to be and that to win Best Animated Feature, and I loved it, and really looking forward to the sequel.
Yeah, same. I mean, I didn't know what to expect going into this. I knew it was going to be really cool and very different. But it's an amazing introduction to the character of Miles Morales, an amazing introduction to his world, but also it made me so happy to see Spider-Gwen. Like, seeing her on stage on screen brought to life, just, I mean, like, I had butterflies when I saw her in civilian attire, and I recognized her right away, and I'm like, oh, it's Gwen.
Yeah,
Spider-Gwen.
But especially to not have to be bogged down and explaining. It was so economic how they explained the multiple universes. So that was always a worry for me. That it would take so long for them to explain how there's a Gwen that got bitten by the spider. And me too. I mean, she's one of my favorites as well. And to have that was great.
Well,
and of course Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the medium of animation just played that up and it made that possible. And that I was going to say that ties into what Lima was just saying in the chats.
Yeah.
And so while you're pulling that up, though, I do want to, I'm not 100% that this is true, but I feel like it is. That Stan Lee passed away in 2017. I want to say this was the first time since his death that we saw a Marvel thing. And there was a little bit of Stan Lee in this. And I know Stan Lee, a controversial character. You get a bunch of comic nerds sitting around, and you've got one person that loves him, regardless of anything. You've got one person that hates him. I remember sitting in the theater, just like, on the Stan Lee cameo and just getting getting that throat, getting it caught in your throat and just getting all misty eyed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lima says here, to bring up what you had mentioned here, Persepolis and Into the Spider-Verse make strong cases for animation as the truly audiovisual feature that does justice to comic books. And I do agree. In some cases, I definitely agree that animation, because again, it's that kind of very heightened, very interpretive and expression of reality that goes into comics. It's not picture realist that you're seeing usually on the comics page. And so having that kind of, beautiful style and the anything goes that can happen in a comic book and see that translated so perfectly on screen in animation, that makes it just like jump off the page. Whereas a live action, there's a lot of interpretation, a lot of the actors, embodying these characters. You kind of, sometimes you have to kind of say, well, it doesn't look like he does on the page, but there's so-and-so.
Okay. Well, that's going to feed into my number 4 pick, because mine is also an animated feature. And when we were discussing what would qualify for this, we didn't come down on the end of television, but we were okay with direct-to-video situations. And in this particular case, for a number of years, I want to thank Gary Mirano of Warner Brothers for these invites, that when they did have DC original animated movies, they would often have a promotional event where it would be screens in front of an audience, usually at the Paley Center, but there were some other areas in New York that would get them. So I saw this particular film, and The Dark Knight, and many of the Lego films, and Justice League Dark, and it's such a great experience seeing this with an audience, which is a shame because that's not the part and parcel for the direct-to-video movies. But the one that is in my number 4 slot is Superman Batman Apocalypse, which is a sequel to Superman Batman Public Enemies. And thank you for providing that, Steve. And if you will see here, the art style is very much based on the work of Michael Turner, who did the art for the original Superman Batman arc that this was part of, which introduced Supergirl, or I should say reintroduced Supergirl to the DC universe. It is a sequel to Public Enemies, and that film in itself was also formatted in its style around the artist who did that initial arc, which was Ed McGuinness. This is one of the most impressive voice casts you're ever going to get for any kind of animated film. You have Andre Braugher as Darkseid. You have the return of Timothy Daly as Superman and Kevin Conroy as Batman and Susan Eisenberg, for that matter, as well as Wonder Woman, from the Timverse, however you want to talk about the animated universe that was on television through the 90s and 2000s. Probably the most inspired bit of casting. Ed Asner as Granny Goodness. It's just just perfectly cast, and it's a shame she's retired, but Andre Romano really knew what she was doing. And as I said, it depicts the events of Supergirl coming to Earth, and they know when she lands, Superman's very happy to see that his cousin was actually older than he was, but because of time delays traveling through space, that he's seeing her again. But there also is the knowledge that she is probably the most powerful person on Earth, next to Clark, or maybe even more powerful. And this attracts both the Amazons and the New Gods and Darkseid wants her. And the exploration for the remainder of the movie is the push and pull of somebody trying to grow up on their own and having all these forces in the way. The soundtrack is exquisite. I forgot who the composer was. Maybe it's on my thing here. John Paisano. I mean, feature film level quality of a soundtrack, and I just adore it. And also, it's something new, but it also has the ties to the past with the two principal actors having a long association with those characters. And Batman's actually funny in this movie. He actually has the best laugh lines, and you're not used to that ever. So it's directed by Lauren Montgomery, who directed the Wonder Woman animated movie and was involved with many animation projects. This particular project landed her the showrunner job for Legend of Korra, and yep. And then she later was also the principal force behind the revival of Voltron that ran on Netflix. And I just think it's by far the best DC animated movie. But from my point of view, it's the best comic book animated movie ever. So,
well, that's some pretty high praise for it. And Mike Sullivan also is very excited with the choice of Ed Asner. Mike says, I think Ed Asner should have played Granny in a live action. And I think, it's unfortunate that he did just recently pass away, but that would have been an amazing curtain call kind of role for him.
Yeah.
As Granny Goodness in a live action film.
Just Ed Asner running around with a giant vibrator. Yeah.
I mean, Granny?
Yeah. Have you guys seen this movie?
She's always got a smile. I have. Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I watched it when it was
2010. I forgot to say the year. It's 2010.
Yeah, and I think around that time too, it was released in like a dual feature set. So you had Public Enemies and Apocalypse, sort of like maybe released in like a
but it's like one of those things that you buy at the supermarket. It wasn't like a mass market release.
It's like a 2-for-1 kind of thing.
And also has a fantastic Green Arrow animated short in there as well, on the backup on the DVD and the Blu-ray. So okay,
that's pretty. It was good. Oh, and we've got John Runyon has joined us. Comic Book.
Hey, John.
Welcome, John.
Yeah, John, we have to hear the Bill Willingham story at some point. I'm gonna pressure you for
Yes,
that.
yes, we will. We will
Okay.
have to do that.
All right.
Um,
Let's go over to Steve. What's your number 3 pick?
well, talking about how Supergirl is one of the most powerful characters that's introduced in that film or reintroduced in that film. I kind of also want to take another strong and extremely long running woman character that for about 75 years people said there's no possible way you could ever make a movie featuring this character and have it actually be successful, despite having an extremely successful TV series, live action TV series for a couple of years in the late 70s or early 80s, and being featured in pretty much every animated series that DC put out from the 70s on. And that is Wonder Woman, who, we finally got the Wonder Woman film. I believe it was 2017, was it? That it was originally released. And this was just it was, yeah, everybody's got Wonder Woman. This movie was so good. I mean, this is one that I saw multiple times in the theaters, but for a film that's an origin film, and those are so tough right now to make really exciting, especially when it's a character that is so well known, for people to be able to enjoy themselves in. Like, I've seen this thing a million times. But it made it fresh. It made it very just new and exciting to see the origin and to see her transition from Themyscira to Man's World. We had already been introduced to her in the previous year's Batman v Superman. She had don't want to say it was a bit part. It was not a bit part. It was like a extended cameo, I guess. As Wonder Woman, she kind of showed up towards the end, but she was Diana Prince the rest of the film. But this gave you just an amazing interpretation of Wonder Woman. There are parts in this movie that still give me goosebumps and chills when I see them. The big one, of course, is her climbing out of the foxhole in No Man's Land and just slow motion trudging across No Man's Land, getting shot at, smashing away, ordnance like it was nothing. Just that image is, it really to this day continues to impress me. Like, that is good filmmaking. Gal Gadot really, embodied Wonder Woman here. Everything, including the supporting cast, is just phenomenal in this film. The plot, yeah, people do complain about the plot. They complain about the ultimate villain in this, but to me, it's not bad. Like, that part, whatever. The main fact of this film existing is that we get a real image of Wonder Woman. We get a real Diana that, for years we had been told could never happen or not happen well, and nobody would watch it and nobody would care. I think it made a ton of money. So enough to get a sequel, enough to really launch a 1,000 things of merch. I mean, whatever. If the goal is to make a ton of money, well, guess what it did. But I love this film, and I can always go back and rewatch it and just laugh at the humor that was inserted in this. It's not a super serious, oh my God, war movie. It's got some great romantic, great, quiet moments in it. Amazing action, incredible fight scenes, and some really great effects. And I love it. So yeah. My number 3.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Will slightly disagree with you that while I do think, I just made a new word, While I don't think that this is necessarily drenched in heaviness, I do think that the circumstances are potent. That she's contending.
Oh yeah.
I do think that comes through. I think this was a film that made a big difference in 3D. I thought that battle scene when they get to the village in 3D was just, oh my God. It was like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't care. You tell me, like, I can only see something in 2D. This was one where I did think it made a difference. When we were talking about music of the film, I'm sure Mozart's Piano Concerto would come up on number one for this guy, but of the pieces we talked about, that boom, 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 that theme, he loves it.
Instantly recognizable. Like immediately the first time we heard it, we're like, okay, this is already a legend in its own time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I also love this film. I am one of the people who thinks that it kind of the third act it kind of slipped a little bit. I wasn't crazy about the ending. I think it worked. I think it worked just fine. But there were things that I wish they had have done differently. I won't even say better, just differently.
Yeah.
But there's a line from this film that myself and my friends who do a lot of work in the unsheltered community, we repeat around each other constantly. It's not about what people deserve. It's about love. And that to me is the perfect line. And that's something that I instantly took to heart, and just adore this film and the message that it sends.
And just, she's just nailed Diana so well. Like my favorite moment is a very quiet moment when she says, "Charlie, who's going to sing for us?" I mean, that's Diana, like to the T. And, it's almost as if we waited for this film for her to be ready, for her to be born.
It took over 75 years, but we got it.
And it's worth mentioning, if you want to see this film, both this and Superman Batman Apocalypse are streaming on HBO Max.
Yay.
All right, over to Caleb. Caleb, what's your number 3?
I'm going to take us back to the 90s. It was a good decade. I'm going to take us back to 1994 to a movie that is solidly in one of my when you were asking earlier if any of our picks would have made it to our top 10 all-time list, this one would. This one is one of my top 10 films of all time, because I think it is perfect in its imperfections. Not only the way the darkness that it depicts, but also the love that it depicts. Because it's a cult classic and it was never supposed to work, and everybody and their brother knows it, and because the source material is one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, and that is James O'Barr's The Crow. And the soundtrack. I cannot talk about the soundtrack enough. This is the quintessential film soundtrack for me. I pit this against any other movie soundtrack.
I can't tell you how many times I have played the Nine Inch Nails cover of Joy Division's Dead Souls. I can't tell you how many times. It's innumerable.
Yes.
From start to last, the album is just perfect. Even the odd man out for the album to me is the Pantera song, and still it just works. And James O'Barr was instrumental in getting all these people and putting them on the list. You get the cult classic aspect of it from the death of Brandon Lee, rest in peace. But everything about this just works so well. Michael Wincott is the perfect villain. Just still will give you chills. What I love about this story, I'm sure everybody knows it. At the end of the day, the story is, yes, it's gothy. Yes, it's a little bit violent. Yes, it deals with the seedy underbelly of the world, but it's a love story. And it's a love story that, if you know the history, it's written a little bit about James O'Barr's life. James O'Barr lost a girlfriend, a fiance, in a car accident, and that's what led to a lot of things that James O'Barr has dealt with over the years. And he translated that pain into The Crow, into this idea that love doesn't die, that it can resurrect, and love can it can be a vengeful force, but it can keep you motivated. It can give you a reason to last and go on. And they just won it with this film. It is Detroit. It is everything that Detroit was at that time, and probably still is in a lot of ways. It is gritty. If you don't have films like The Crow, I don't know that you get films like The Matrix later on, which I'm also a big fan of, just because of the visual and the visage of the whole thing. Somebody posted Cacao. I mean, that's just known. There's so many one-liners.
Hey, Kevin Sonicson, who posted that cacao.
The idea that mother is the name of God on the lips of all children, that stays with me through all time. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was killed by a drunk driver when my mother was 8, and I was not around to see any of that, obviously, but I've seen what the aftermath of losing a spouse can do to a family, can do to a man who doesn't have, who lost that and had to continue to go on. but wanted that revenge, wanted to right wrongs, and just never could get their arms wrapped around justice. And there was always something there. So, I mean, I have that personal connection with it. But again, just diving into the movie and the, you know, the vision of having the Crow in flames wrap around Tintin's car, and just having it, you know, just for being a young boy in the 90s, you know, a young man driven by testosterone and stuff like that, to have this and to really not know what exactly it was and what exactly I loved about it till the future. You know, and I've read, people have written their doctoral theses on this book, and it breaks the mold on things like toxic masculinity. Just it's way before its time. And, you know, I can go listen to I think this was my first introduction to Jesus and Mary chain, Bill. Like
Yes.
Like, it's just all across the board. And again, they took some great scenes from the comic book and they made it come to life on screen. And it just still fills my heart with joy. I can still watch it, and I still cry. I still cry every time. Just solid tear just rolls down. And then I go turn on the soundtrack and I rock the fuck out, because what else can you do?
So, now I'm thinking about that soundtrack and, you know, Forgotten. I mean, Machines of Loving Grace and the Rollins Band cover, and
it can't rain all the time, you know. Like, I mean,
and then ending with that beautiful Jane Siberry song.
Yep.
Yeah. Such a great soundtrack.
Like
one thing I do have to say is it's also an exceptionally well directed film. And the director, Alex Proyas, I thought he was going to have a bigger career than he did. And I hope he does course correct, because his next film I thought was an incredibly which does have very specific comic book connections, though it's not based, and that's Dark City, which I thought was a stunning cinematic work.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know,
one of my favorites. Favorites.
Wonderful Dark film. City. I hope he gets it back, because he's a very talented guy, and, you know, especially when you read about, you know, that they didn't actually finish filming, you know, because of the circumstance of the Brandon Lee, and also just the alignment of all the weird shit. You know, between, you know, what the story is based on, and, you know, it wasn't just, you know, there were other people involved in the production that kind of strangely passed away too. During and before. It's a haunted film, you know. I think is the best way to put it. And you know, good choice, Caleb. You know, it wouldn't have made mine, because I do think there are some elements that are very 90s about it, to its detriment. But it's certainly impressive, and I do think now I think I'm going to watch Dark City after this now, because it's so good.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say this: like this really has framed my like, I don't know that I'm sitting in this chair if not for this book, because
that's awesome.
I've always said that, you know, the thing that got me into comics and made me love superheroes was Busiek's Avengers, Busiek and Perez's Avengers. But the thing that made me love comics culture in the comics world was really James O'Barr. James O'Barr was the first comic creator I ever met. He's the reason I went to my first comic convention. He's the reason I went to my first New York Comic Con, because I wanted to meet him again. You know, the first piece of original comic art I own is a James O'Barr Crow head sketch. So, like, all of these things, just my love for this film really played into why I'm sitting here talking to you guys, and why I have a room full of ephemera that you know, I would, you know, literally tried to run inside a burning house one time to pull out. So it's just like that frames a lot of why this is important to me.
Awesome.
So we have a couple comments here. Lima as well. I have a crystal clear memory of reading an Amazing Heroes description of the Crow as a cross between Batman and Robert Smith. It was love at first sight. I guess that totally fits. And also the Cure on the soundtrack.
And the soundtrack, they kick it off. I don't even have to think about the order. I've played the soundtrack so.
And when I heard that Tim Pope was going to direct the continuation to The Crow, I thought it would be perfect with all the wonderful Cure videos he directed. Boy, was I wrong. There are plenty of sequels to the film. City of Angels was not bad, but it basically is retelling the entire first movie just in LA. It was some weird semi-post-apocalyptic kind of LA. But then everything else that came afterwards, because I think there's like 2 or 3 more movies.
I think there's one more movie, and then there's a TV series.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I straight to video kind of shot.
I don't.
No.
Yeah, and with Tim
Oh,
Pope, I
and
mean,
David Toby is also joined. Hello, David.
hey, David Toby. Also, I mean, it is a shame about Tim Pope because video directors, you either have, you know, some very. Why am I blanking on the? It's one of my favorite films, Zodiac. What's it? David Fincher, or you
Yeah.
do have, kind of
Mhm.
sad careers like Russell Mulcahy when it came to.
Well,
Yeah, but they're all
and then you have those
interesting.
kind of like in
Yeah,
betweens, like Michel Gondry, who has visually stunning
yeah.
films that just don't
Spike
really hit that
Jones.
popular level. Spike
Yeah,
Jones, yeah.
Jones. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's next to me, and we're going to be talking about a big one, a big movie. One other thing I did want to say is, The Crow was also very important because this, along with The Mask, showed that you could
Yeah.
have an independent film that,
Yeah.
a film based on an independent property that could be financially successful. I mean,
Absolutely.
the Crow, what was it? It was like something like 194 million on a 23 million investment.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
huge profit on that. And sadly, The Crow is not currently streaming. It was on Tubi with the sequels, but again, these are cyclical and seems to be on some moratorium. But you can buy it through Vudu and Amazon Prime, those resources. Okay, it sounds like everything started for you with the Crow, and I'm going to be talking about what really is my first comic book movie, and that's Superman, also known as Superman the movie from 1978. When this film came out, I was 11 years old. So what an age for this to be
Hmm.
part of your life. It's the first film that I saw on its opening day. My parents knew that this was going to be something very special.
Mhm.
I have a I don't want to get emotional about this because there's such a like the first Star Wars film. There's so much emotion tied to my recollections of enjoying this film. But directed by Richard Donner and introduced Christopher Reeve to the world effectively. Brilliant comedic performance by Gene Hackman as
Mhm.
Lex Luthor. I and basically is an origin story uh, done in three parts. It's almost like three films in one. You have the sterility of Krypton, then you have the Norman Rockwell-ish ambience of the American Midwest and Smallville, and then Metropolis and his becoming a superhero. Um, I'll probably give like a really terrible synopsis of the film, so I'm just going to avoid that. I think it's a film that most people have seen at some point, so I'm not going to go
Mhm.
through that. But for its time, it's maybe hard to process this through 2021 eyes, but at the time, yes, they were state of the art effects, and yes, we did believe a man can fly because of it. Um, the Donner films. I mean, they're like a huge entry point for so many prominent comic book creators like Greg Rucka and Mark Waid.
Mhm.
They're not perfect. The Donner films, there was so much footage that you do have things like the 3 hour long TV version, and then the special edition, which was Donner's final restoration of that. Richard Donner passed away very recently, um, but just again with Star Wars and the feeling that the United States had at the time of kind of sobering up from the darkness that was the Vietnam War. This was kind of the second act of that Star Wars, or maybe Jaws even in some ways, because there's though it's a horror film, there's a lot of joy in Jaws. Just in its execution. Now, there really
Yeah.
is, but it is a very important film, I think, in that it's basically the first comic book film as we know it. And,
Mhm.
again, because of cost prohibition and, it's amazing to me that the distance between Superman the movie and Batman 89 is 11 years, where in the in the terrain we have right now, it would probably be like 14 months. That you would have a follow-up involving another character. But I think there are elements of that still hold up whenever it's in revival houses I go. I went to the most recent 40th anniversary showings that were part of Fathom events, and it's still way, way up there for me. Superman the movie, my number 3.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, I think, probably the first comic book movie that I ever saw as a teeny tiny tot in the very early 80s. This is definitely one of those movies that they showed on TV. Back before we owned a VHS player, we didn't have a VCR, so we would watch the Sunday night movie or the special
in two parts.
The special movie was
in two parts.
Like, I mean, it was an event, and
I can't tell you, Steve, when they first did that, and there's a substantial amount of footage that's in those TV versions that wasn't in the theatrical. I was losing my mind. Now we're used to it. Now we're used to it with bonus features. Yeah. That just didn't happen. I mean, like The Godfather, I think, was probably the first one that with the TV airings when they did weird things like the Godfather saga and showed it in sequential order, which just fucked me up for the rest of my life because I always consider like the first film has De Niro in it, and it doesn't. But oh god, just so much fondness for this film and what it eventually brought about.
I grew up. I had 2 VHSs that I loved, and they weren't like bought VHSs. They were blank tapes that were recorded off of television, and one was Conan the Barbarian, and one was Superman the movie. And I can't. By the time I was done with them, it was just wavy lines. I wore those.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, this is one of those things that we got the VHS rented when we first bought a VCR. This was one that we rented very frequently because to own a copy would have been like, I guess, like $40-50 or something crazy.
Okay, so you see my Blu-ray and the special edition Blu-ray. I think I've bought this film 7 times.
7 times
in home video format, from a VHS version to DVD to a second DVD. I think it's been 7 times. So there's 7 different versions that I have. I once had it in Spanish. That there was Warner's used to put out the Spanish language tape separately, and it was 99 cents. And the woman who played who did Lois Lane's voice sounds remarkably like Margot Kidder. I don't know where that tape is now, but had it a lot.
As David mentions, entertainment, but not on demand. What? Yes, back in the day,
and still,
in the olden days.
I don't care if it's not streaming because I got it in my hands. I don't care.
Exactly.
But if you want to see it streaming, you can go to HBO Max.
Yep, I think all of them are now streaming.
All of them are streaming on HBO Max right now. Yep.
Yeah. So,
all right, Steve, we're getting closer to the end. What's your number 2?
So this is where it gets a little tricky, because all 3 of us have this movie on our lists, and Bill, you and I have it as our number 2. Caleb has it as his number 1.
Oh,
so if you guys are okay with it, I'm going to skip my number 2.
And I'll skip my number 2, and we'll wait till your number 1. I think that sounds like a very good idea.
So I'm going to skip.
Thank you for bringing that up, Steve, for the flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny, but we all 3 of us had this movie as one of our top 2s, just, by coincidence, but
because it's awesome. It's not by coincidence.
Yeah. Because it's a great movie.
The right answer.
Yeah, because of course we're all gonna love it. So my movie, my number 1, and this is probably gonna surprise a lot of people because a lot of people don't think of me as someone who likes a lot of hyper violence with my films, although and a lot of hyper masculinity and a lot of hyper ironic masculinity. But I do. And this movie is one of those films that I can watch over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and never get sick and tired of it. Ever. I'm like a 5-year-old with a Land Before Time Part 17 movie. I can just watch that whole damn thing over and over again. And that is the movie Dredd. Not the Stallone Judge Dredd piece of shit. No. It is Dredd, the movie that came out, I believe, oh gosh, what was it, like 2015, 2014? Probably about 2014. But this one I actually saw multiple times in the theater in 3D, because this is another one of those movies that, for if you have the ability to watch it in 3D, it works. There's some amazing images that come through so well when you have, when you can watch it in 3D. And predominantly it's the drug scenes where we see everything slowed down and the colors become hyper saturated, and there's like sparkly light effects that are coming off of every surface. That in 3D, it is transformative. And so are people's heads exploding and faces smashing open, and all sorts of wonderful things that you can see in 3D that are super gory. But this movie is just, if you weren't into S&M and like leather and gear or whatever before this, just seeing this image right here, I mean, this will do it for pretty much. Like, you can watch this movie and it's like, I think I have a fetish now, just because it is done so well. The costuming is perfect. And just the personification of Judge Dredd just works. I mean, this is what Judge Dredd, how I think he sounds, how I think he acts and moves from 2000 AD, like from the comics to this. It is a perfect translation. How I mentioned before that it's so hard to see like the from something that's a drawn, from an artistic rendition of a particular character, and then see it played by a live action actor. It's like, oh, well, it's the actor playing this character. No, this is Judge Dredd. I don't care what else he's done. He is Judge Dredd in this movie, 100%. And there's just a great cast. It's wonderful. The dialogue is just so, it's Spartan, but it's with purpose.
Which is great.
It just makes me, I love it. I love this movie. People hate this movie. I absolutely love it. Love it. I don't know what else I could say about it. The basic soundtrack, because there's not like a big driving like rock soundtrack, but there is some great musical cues in this. Especially towards the beginning when he's on his bike, like chasing down a bunch of perps, that are hitting the drugs, the slow-mo, just that, it just gets you going, gets you pumped up in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And just, of course, the bleak future that this presents. There's so many great Easter eggs and just visual cues that if you read 2000 AD ever, you're going to be like, oh, they made that, they put that in, oh my god, look at that, look, it's one of the, like all of that is in this movie. And yeah, again, like I said, some people hate this movie. I am not one of them. I absolutely love it. It is my currently top comic book movie. Anybody else watch this?
Waves my hand. No, I love this movie, and I actually got giddy that you picked this so high up in your rank, because I would have not picked this movie if I had to bet money on what your favorite comic book movie was. It would not have been Dredd. But it is such a fantastic movie, and it is it is true to its roots, not only in 2000 AD, but also from just like the visual ideology of the what is the tower, I think is what
yeah, they're the Mega
City 1.
It's Mega City 1, but like the blocks are, well, it's Peach Trees is the name of the block. Yeah. They're all in Mega blocks,
but the concept of going into the building, there is an old Japanese movie called The Tower where they essentially do the same thing, where they work their way up. So that's what I'm saying. It is true to its roots. It plays up the just the idea of it. Carl Urban is Dredd. He just the helmet, everything. And what I love about this movie is that you still get the heart, which is hard to get from just having that's one thing the Stallone movie didn't get right, was the heart that could be in a Dredd story without making the heart come from Dredd. It's his juxtaposition with the other judges and with everybody else that really draws it out. And this was my number 7, I think, when I made out my top 10 list. Or my list that was going to be my top 5 that turned into a 10. This was number 7 for me. Yeah, such a badass flick.
Olivia Thirlby as Judge Anderson. To be able to play off of what is essentially a scowling brick wall. The entire movie, Carl Urban is just like, like the entire time. Olivia Thirlby just sort of like lends some weird, like some humanity to that. I mean, but it works. Like they're not like a, like a good cop, bad cop. It's like, really good, also a fascist cop and a pretty, but also she's got some dark side, twisted cop. Like there's just that wonderful kind of partnership that you see on screens you don't really see very many places.
And to be juxtaposed with the foil that is Lena goddamn Headley. Like just
Mama, she is one of the best villains. She's one of the best villains because she doesn't give a fuck. Like this woman.
One single one is given. And she just is nasty in this film. In a way that she's like not nasty in Game of Thrones. Like she brings a different level of nasty.
Just that sort of like, it's like laconic, like nastiness. Like there's a part in the beginning where, there are two guys who've been like, cutting in on their territory. And, her lieutenant basically says, so what do we do with them? And she's like, skin them and throw them over the side. Like, just like skin them and throw them over the side. Skin them. Cutting their skin off while they're still alive, and then just flipping them off from the top of a 200-story mega block tower where they splat down on the bottom in front of like a public, in a public plaza, almost getting a poor woman who's pushing her kid in a stroller. Like, I mean, this is the kind of evil that Lena Headey's character is, and it is so chilling, and it's perfect because it is arch, but arch like lazy arch, like. She could have gone like over the top with this, but now she's like, yeah, you see this? If you kill me, I'll fucking blow this whole place up and everyone will die. Okay, cool.
I think we have to call her like, goddamn Deadly Headey now. That's her middle name. It's gonna go on.
Just, wonderful.
So I think the way we're doing this now, I think I need to go next to talk about my number 2 before we all talk about number 1s. So. Gonna take us back further in time. I'm starting. Like, apparently, I'm the old man of the group this time. I'm just progressively going back. But I know this is a film that you all love as well, and it's one I'm getting. Again, everything that I look for. Ironically, it's not in my number 1. Soundtrack to this movie is amazing. It kills. All-star cast, and that is, I can't even tell you the cast because you'll just know, but it's Batman. It is Batman 1989, and it really set the stage. I think it set the stage for our modern era of superhero films. Like where like Bill said, there was 11 years between Superman and this, and this really just took it and ran with. I don't even know what you call it, but it's Tim Burton being Tim Burton just across the board. He got a little bit more.
The best comment I ever heard with what you're talking about, Caleb, is that Superman 78 is Elvis Presley, Batman 89 is the Beatles.
Yeah. You can't. It is hitting on every level. Everything is in sync. Michael Keaton just wins. He. Everything from the grimacing Dark Knight in the suit to just being Bruce Wayne, like he was just a pretentious prick of a billionaire when he needed to be, but he was the knight. He made you scared. That cowl, even though he couldn't move his head and he looked like a mannequin shifting with his shoulders, like it just like you could still. He did not feel stiff. It felt like he was fighting crime. He embodied that. Jack Nicholson, who like. My favorite Jack Nicholson role is actually not this film. It's actually Easy Rider. I love his character in Easy Rider. Like I don't know why, because he just he plays the third level on that. But regardless, transformed I think the way that we really do think about the Joker. He is hard to peg down because like people like to make those lists. You have the clown from the television show, you have the gangster from '89, you've got the anarchist from Dark Knight. I don't think it's fair to just pin him down to being the gangster. He's a little bit of everything. He is sadistic. He is a gangster, but he's insane. He is an anarchist. He wants to see everything burn. He's driven by hate, but more so he's driven by obsession. Kim Basinger just is gorgeous in this film, all across the board. So I was 2 when this film came out, but I don't know how many versions of this movie. I just killed Bill. Bill just died out. Like, for those of you who are listening, he just fell over. I don't know how many versions of this film I've worn out. Like, I just continue to watch it. And this was my first introduction to Prince as a musical entity. What more? So and I think this was my first introduction to Batman. Like, I think this was it. This is how I found Batman. Batman and Prince. So the best comic book duo of all time.
I mean, this is definitely my first introduction to Prince. It was not my first Batman, because that was the Batman original series. That was
wait. Hold on. Hold on. So you were born in 1980, right, Steve?
Yeah.
So you didn't have any familiarity with Prince until you were 9 years old?
I grew up in a household where the only music that was allowed was either gospel, a cappella, or Amy Grant. So
then you wouldn't have heard Prince. Okay.
Mid-90s.
I guess.
Prince was not allowed in my house.
Okay. All right.
But also Billy D. Williams, number one, we got to mention him because he was great in this.
Yeah.
But to date, one of my favorite. No, I don't think, I can't say it's the favorite, but Michael Gough as Alfred framed the way I think thought of Alfred forever. Mm-hmm. Like, he is this little man with such a big heart and such a big stature, that is just the pinnacle of class to me. And that framed the way I thought about him for a long, long time.
I also think Robert Wolpe gives a very nice comedic performance, and he's somebody that I can just look at and laugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And remember, it was one of those movies you had to have 2 soundtracks.
Yep. I remember when this was coming out, because it was promoted extremely heavily, and I did get to see it in the movie theater.
It was nothing like it.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved it. I think my parents were kind of like surprised. I think this is rated PG, but it was so great. And of course, Nintendo was really pushing the Batman video game at the time, even though I hear that it was terrible. I never got to play it. Just all sorts of things with this movie that just,
so
was unique and new.
Okay, so like when I was making like the "oh my god, I'm so old" faces when Caleb just said that you were 2, and then Steve, you would have been 9 when this came out.
What time of year? I was between 8 and 9.
So 8 and 9. Okay, yeah. So you were young kids. I had just graduated college. All right, and this was the release in the summer, like right after it came out, 3 weeks after I graduated. And no money, you don't have any money, because you don't have your first job yet, even if you had a job lined up, probably doesn't start till September. So, and I was spending like so much on the Toy Biz toys and the posters, because it really was mania. I mean, stuff was everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And it was really exciting. I think it kind of holds up. I think it holds up much better than the other 3 films that are part of the Burton-ish era. Yeah, I do. I hate Batman Returns. I know we'll have a big disagreement on this one. Yeah, no, it's like, yes. Sorry, I like Michelle. I like Michelle Pfeiffer.
Torn off.
I like Michelle Pfeiffer. But it's especially rewatching it a couple weeks ago, and it's it's a studio shot film, like almost completely. There's one outdoor scene.
100%.
And my God, when you have like a high definition thing, boy, it shows. I mean, you like expecting to see like tape on flats. Yeah. So if you do watch it again, maybe if you have a DVD version, maybe go with that. Go. It's standard definition.
Turn down the resolution a little bit.
Yeah,
make it fuzzy.
It might help you out. But I think this one still, it still holds up. Pretty much.
Yep.
All right, over to my number one. So we're going to go over to Caleb's number one, which is also my number two and Steve's number two. The movie I want to talk about is another case where it's not a superhero film, and that is the 2005 mob action thriller. I don't know how to describe it. A History of Violence.
Yeah.
Directed by David Cronenberg, starring Viggo Mortensen and Maria Bello. How Maria Bello was not nominated for Best Supporting Actress in this movie, it boggles me. She is so friggin' electric in this movie. William Hurt was for his 6 minutes on screen. Still don't know why. And Ed Harris is in this film, and basically Viggo Mortensen is the owner of a small town diner in what turns out to be, I was very disappointed in this, a fictional town in Indiana. And it turns out he has a past, and part of that past was as a very effective hitman. And people from his past come to this small town, that we discover, though he calls himself Tom, he's actually named Joey Cusack. And this movie, oh my god, it baffles me that I'm not the biggest Cronenberg fan. I'm not the biggest fan of most of the male actors that are in this, but it uses them so well in this context. There is a scene which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and this was a 2005. I'm not sure if they could do this scene now, where basically Viggo and Maria Bello have sex on the stairs, and this is after they've had a very substantial argument, and it shows the very fine line that can exist between sex and violence. And it's a stunning scene. And that would be, though this film would not be in my top 10 films of all time, that scene would be in my top 10 scenes. It's don't expect like a zany romp. I mean, it is a very violent film, which you can tell by the title. But for a film to display how tense situations, and particularly family situations, can be, given the secrets that somebody holds in their past. I just think it's a stunning work, and I loved it. I've been showing my Blu-ray copies. I have a weird 2-movie collection of this with American History X. That's not exactly a film that I really was expecting this to be hanging out with, but it's still the full thing. It's still 2 Blu-rays that didn't sell that they put in one package. It's a stunning piece of work, and you have there the original graphic novel that this was based on, written by John Wagner with art by Vince Locke, and was originally part of DC's Paradox line, which I think eventually was eventually swallowed up by Vertigo. And one of those films that I think the films that we were talking about, like Persepolis and The Death of Stalin, that some people would be very surprised that a graphic novel was the origin point for this story. And it actually is though there are some differences in the story, it does follow at least the tone of the graphic novel very closely. There's certain deviations to the story, but the tone, you see there with a mobster having a guy hanging in a butcher hole. It's a very good way. Have you guys ever seen this film? Yeah.
I've only watched it once, though. Watched it once.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah.
So it's funny you were talking about scenes. You were talking about scenes, that it being one of your favorite scenes. So I agree with that. That is absolutely, interestingly enough, another scene that Viggo Mortensen does from Eastern Promises, which is the bathhouse fight scene.
Yeah.
those two scenes are two of my favorite scenes in cinema. I think they're both incredibly well done.
Something about Viggo Mortensen in actually both of those movies brings to mind the word sinewy, very, very strongly. And I get that feeling from him, from Ed Harris, and from Willem Dafoe. They just personify sinewy, and they do like to get shirtless.
Yeah,
for some
and
reason.
just even the smaller parts, like Peter McNeil as the sheriff of the town. I mean, just a really exquisite performance of somebody who's just so outgunned, and just portrays that so well. And it's a very, very good film. And that's my number one. And that's the film I would say is, out of all the comic book based films, this is the one that I think that I would say is both my favorite and both the best one. Sometimes they're not exactly in alignment, my 10 favorite films, Mommy Dearest is up there. I'm never going to pretend that's a great film, but in terms of favorites, God knows it is. So sometimes best and favorite aren't married. In this case, I think they most definitely are.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting to the number one. That's Caleb's, my number two, Steve's number two. So I think this is probably the consensus pick of the best comic book film. Let's just say, in terms of consensus, we'll go that way. So it's your number one, Caleb. Talk about it.
All right, so this is going. I really don't think this is going to surprise many people. It is many people's favorite Marvel film. I think it's a stalwart of the Marvel enterprise, the machine. It features characters that have formed the backbone of this, and of course, it's none other than Howard the Duck. We all just no, I'm kidding. It is Captain America: Winter Soldier. To me, this really showcased the epitome of what the Marvel machine does, which is they make comic book movies, but the way that they win the comic book movie game is they don't make comic book movies. They make genre films steeped in the magic and the notion of what they are, and then they attach a superhero to it. And that is this film to me. It is one of the best espionage spy films. To me, it's up there with things like Jason Bourne. It's up there with some of the best 007 films as far as what it dictates and puts out there. But it just also nails the character. Like, it takes all of that love from that genre element of it, and the three people on your screen. It gives you the heart of Steve, this man lost in time, this man out of place. It gives you the Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow is phenomenal in this. She is dangerous. She is deadly. You don't know which way she's going to twist and turn. Samuel L. Jackson is a sheet of ice. Like, in this movie, he is just stoic when he needs to be, but he drops line after line after line that just are one-liners that crack me up. It also gives you a gateway into the future of kind of where Marvel's heading with these movies, with the return of Bucky with the Winter Soldier. It shows you, and that to me is the biggest part. It plays off of the Red Scare elements. So there's a little bit of history there, and it shows this East-West rift with the people who made Bucky into the Winter Soldier, and his drive to kind of right those wrongs. And man, just the idea and just the largeness of this film as they show you what S.H.I.E.L.D. is and what it can be and what it's not. And this one man standing against, he's the man at the wall in this movie, and kind of just the last vestige of hope and faith in a system that might not work when it needs to, but the spirit of the system is alive in him. And I can get goosebumps talking about this movie all day long. It's definitely my favorite Marvel film. It's my favorite superhero film. And I think this was the other film I was talking about. I said I had two that would fit into my top 10. I think this would probably fit into my top 10. I think it's perfect from intro to outro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. There is one character missing from this poster who has an integral part in the film. And we could go through the reasons why he's not front and center on this poster as well. And that is Anthony Mackie's Falcon.
Absolutely.
plays a very prominent, pivotal role in this film as well. It introduces his character as just
He's
as
not
a
there.
veteran. No, he's not.
And
Not
I
at all.
got,
Not in
and
the
also
background.
like on my, Redford's there, but on mine he's over on the side here.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, this is probably one of the best character posters that I was able to find, but it does miss him, and we don't see him there. But all of the characters in this, you got it right. Like, this is a genre film. This is a spy political thriller that just so happens to have comic book characters as the main protagonists and antagonists. And I think they do an amazing job. It's a very well done, very well crafted, exciting, suspenseful thriller of a film. Where the characters don't have these shocking superpowers. Like none of them are blasting lasers out of their faces. There's no flying, no real. Anthony Mackie as the Falcon can fly, but a lot of it is based around sort of this somewhat believable, power set that these characters have. In that they're not all invulnerable. They don't have fire powers that can stop bullets and things like that. I mean, these are characters that can die, that can be hurt.
And even the antagonists, even their plan is steeped in that believable real science. It does have that. I'm glad you talked about the thriller and the espionage, and in some ways this, and mentioned Robert Redford, who has a principal support part in this film. I'm amazed how well it juggles a big cast. It juggles them really, really well. Everybody has their time to shine as an actor, and there is no, maybe Colby Smothers, maybe hers is borders on token, but even she has shit to do. And beyond that, the shared DNA that this movie has with films from the 70s, like, and which are very different films, like All the President's Men and 3 Days of the Condor. There's there's a through line, and that it has one of the principal actors in those films together is a very neat way to tie the bow on it. I just think this was a tremendous film, and talk about great scenes. Steve in the elevator with the other what we think are SHIELD agents. Let's put it that way. I don't want to give too much away there, but I still think this is going to remain the anchor of the Marvel universe for some time to come. It's just a perfectly crafted film by the Russo brothers. Perfectly crafted. There's no wasted shot. There's no thing that you wish moved. I mean, the pace of the film is just right on the money from the word go. It's just a perfectly constructed film, and I love it too.
On your left.
On your left.
On your left. I mean, just there's so many moments in this. The elevator is a huge standout, but so's so's the fight on the Beltway.
Fury in the car. Oh my god.
Fury in the car.
Oh my god.
That was so well done. So well crafted. It gave Sam Jackson a lot to do, because a lot of times in these movies he just kind of stands around. He stands around or he sits around and he says Sam Jackson as Nick Fury things. But this gave him there were stakes here. This was I mean, that's the most amazing thing, to have an action film that is this kinetic and it's still steeped in emotional resonance. I mean, it's such a well done film. I'm talking about it maybe it should be my number one. Well, I mean, it's up there. For both of us, it was number two.
Yeah.
So it was right below our top films, and for Caleb, being number one, I think it's a good, because like we talked about it, our lists are kind of spongy and things change, things switch, things move. I think this is going to be one of those.
This is an evergreen.
Is always near the top.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's kind of a universal thing. Universal, maybe the wrong thing. There are a lot of people just like us who we know. I mean, this is also Craig's favorite, from SFG. This is his favorite one. Across the board, people talk to, this is always at the height. So I think it's not universally recognized, but it's near universally recognized as one of the best comic book films to date.
Yep.
100% agree there.
I adore it.
Yeah, out of the superhero films, and this is not a detriment. This is not a dig at it, but I do think this would be a great film if it wasn't a comic book film.
Yes. Yep.
I hope that that's not a spectacular dig on Batman '89 and Superman '78 and the other movies we talked about in that bucket. It's just wonderful. All right. Yep. All right. Well, I'm looking at the clock because, as I said, I wear the producer hat more than any other with this show, and it's time to start wrapping this up. I wish we could talk about some of our also rans and some of the other comments that have come in, but unfortunately, the clock's against us. So we're going to start wrapping this episode up, and when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him, and we do something very similar here where we signify something that we effectively woof at as well. And it might be a TV program or a film or a comic book or anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, or in this case, viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
So, thinking about this, and I talked about this right before we started recording. I just had to throw this in here as my wolf. This is Wie die Chronicle, which is a German comic book by Ralph Koenig. Very interesting. It's a sex comedy. It's got a lot of naughtiness and smut in it, but it's also one of the funniest and heartfelt comic graphic novels that he's done. They also made this into a film, only available in German. I don't think it's subtitled anywhere or available in other languages. So if you do find it, Wie die Chronicle, it is great fun. If you read the original German or can understand German, it's hilarious. It's great. And it's got a lot of eye candy. So Wie die Chronicle by Ralph Koenig, the comic or the film?
Okay. Over to Caleb. Caleb, what is your wolf of the week?
So my wolf of the week is going to be real quick and real sentimental, but and not too many people are going to care but me. But tomorrow when I wake up, it will mark the 5-year anniversary of being married to the love of my life and the man I get to call my husband. And so that's my wolf of the week. It's always unspoken, but my wolf is always him. It's always him. So 5 years, we've almost been together for a decade. But we've been married for 5 years, and he is my best friend and without a doubt the love of my life. And he has hung out and supported me and pushed me all through this law school thing. And I would not be the man I am if not. I would be dead if he weren't in the picture. So let's just be honest. But he's my wolf of the week. So happy anniversary, baby. I love you and have a good night at work. I'll be here when you get home.
Okay. Happy anniversary, guys. All right. I will talk about one of the great loves of my life. One of them, and it's just been something that's been cycling around my head since Sunday night. And my wolf of the week go to Aaron Rodgers and Mason Crosby of the Green Bay Packers. We were in a situation Sunday night, my heart attack pack, going in a minute and 37 seconds, and all of a sudden the 49ers take the lead at 29-27. And we get the ball downfield, have enough time on the clock, and Mason puts a perfect field goal through. We win 30-28. Sorry about I'm getting the numbering wrong. And oh my God, it's we had a number of incidents. Probably the most prominent was the miracle in Motown of Rodgers to Rodgers in the end zone. But oh my God, I've just been reliving it for days. And, especially with starting off the season looking like total shit and having 2 impressive performances and, luckily the Steelers don't look like they're operating with all guns firing. So I'm hoping we have a very good Sunday as well on that basis. So, so my wolves of the week go to members of the Golden Green. Very happy to be a Packers fan. Always will be.
Yeah, we got Carolina this week. I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah.
Probably not good for you.
It's bizarro football. I mean, it's bizarro football, you know.
Right.
And God, I would have loved to get Sherman though. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, you would have.
Yes. He'd fit in too. That's the thing that gets me. It wouldn't be like I'd say like JJ Watt would suck on the Packers.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he's just not a fit. But Sherman, all right, that's not the type of show. This is the comic book show. So we thank you for joining us again. We are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to download us, you can do so through Apple Podcasts. See, I said it. You can also catch us through Stitcher Radio and many of the other podcatching platforms. If you want to write to us, you can do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to watch us, you can always do so after we do these live streams. You can re-access them from the YouTube channel. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave a pleasant comment because we would really appreciate that and to increase our profile on that particular platform.
Smash that like and subscribe button.
Yeah, so thank you guys. I really I was having a strange day, and it was really nice to be able to retreat into this for 2 hours. And sometimes the theme shows are a little awkward, but this was not at all. And just some great films we talked about. And if that motivates people to see some of these, there is a film you talked about, and maybe you saw from my face. I still haven't seen it. You notice I didn't say much about Dredd.
Yeah.
So I have an assignment, which is really sad because I have seen, I have seen the.
I think you'll like
it.
I think so too. I think so too. And I have it. I have a copy of it, but I just haven't.
Of course you do.
Watch it. Yeah, because I'm me. Yeah. All right. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
And I'm Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion if you're listening. We'll be back real soon.
Woof.